Hello there, this is Adam Asnes with Lingoport, and thank you for joining us at this webinar. I have our special guest, Luz Pineda. She's a senior localization technical project manager at Avigilon, which is a Motorola company. She has embarked on setting up one of the primary people involved was setting up continuous localization at her company. And so she's gone through this whole effort. And now you'll have to forgive me because the title of this webinar is a marketing term that I'm very familiar with. And I got feedback that not everybody else is familiar with it. And, you know, hey, is this a sales pitch or what? No, it's not that. A buyer's journey is like, think of it like the hero's journey, okay? There's a hero's journey when you write an epic, right? And it usually starts with, you know, sort of somebody who wants to try things out, has a vision, goes and undertakes this effort, has setbacks, has trials and tribulations, and comes through and is successful in the end. That's like every superhero Marvel thing ever, right? You know, every big epic ever has that kind of a theme. Disney stories, all that. But what we're going to talk about is the reality. It's a little bit more pedestrian of continuous localization, what it means for specifically for software and all that, what that decision was like, what were the obstacles, what was the trial, and how did Luz's team get through that? What's going on now? What's the vision of the future? So that's the summary of what we're going to talk about. We're going to do it in a Q&A type of environment. So that's my brief introduction. And let's see. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and when I talk about continuous localization, just as a point of reference, what I'm talking about is that software, specifically software developers, have their own set of ways that they're working with that is different than your marketing department in sort of nomenclature and the mechanics of how it all works automatically, right? It's unique to software, but the idea is software developers are pushing out features all the time. You know, we're pretty much gone from the long monolithic development cycles where there'd be like, you know, 1 to 2 releases a year. Now it's just like, it's constantly new features are being released. And that's what we talk about with agile development. You know, there's a whole lockdown of that, but it happens here. If you look at this slide, this is a symbol for a Git repository. That is how developers work. The idea for continuous localization is that when the software developers make changes that need to be localized, that's automatically picked up, send out for translation, it automatically comes back and automatically back into the repository, right? Sounds simple, but it's not, because there's a whole bunch of variables in any organization. Like there's always exceptions, maybe this team does it differently this way or that way, right? And so that's the problem. And the solution is not necessarily obvious, and it's not a one stamp. So we're going to talk about how do you make that work practically in real life. And my apologies for using flags, but I generally don't do that. But I grabbed the slide and I didn't mess with it. All right. So a little bit about Luz. Rather than me, you know, Luz has been involved with on the technical side of all the interactions with Lingoport, and particularly with Olivier Liboban, who many of you know from other webinars. He runs product development here, and he likes to get really involved with our customers. Olivier is actually standing by. He's not on the marquee of this webinar, but he's there in case you want to throw a zinger. So please do on the questions, like I mentioned, do write your questions down. And so Olivier's there if you want to ask something technical that's above my knowledge base. So anyway, Luz, in your own words, can you talk a little bit about your role at Avigilon and Motorola?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Adam. Well, I started my career in Canada working as a localization tester for video games. I know it sounds fun, a lot of work, believe me. Then I spent over 8 years working in different roles in software testing, and I have been working for Avigilon for almost 6 years. This Saturday is going to be my 6th anniversary. And I work for the localization and technical documentation department led by Paula Hunter. Avigilon has a centralized localization program that supports the entire organization. Of course, we focus on localization for software, technical documentation, website, marketing materials, and customer experience. I was hired to focus on supporting the engineering team, so for localization. Of course, soon after I started working for Avigilon, we also started a co-op intern program in order to add automation to our processes. The initiative was actually a success to the point that we were able to convince one of our former interns to join the team permanently. Her name is Jane, and you are going to hear me saying her name over and over because she's been all the way helping us onboarding more product softwares into Lingoport. I recently got promoted to Senior Technical Localization Project Manager, long title. And my main responsibility is to drive the software localization operations.
All right. And in praise of interns, we have them too, and they do all kinds of special projects that are really cool. Anyway.
They're great.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So next slide. Okay. This is where I'm just going to ask Luz questions and she's going to answer. How is your continuous localization rollout going so far? Paint a picture of where you're at.
Well, considering all the moving pieces involved in integrating both tools, Lingoport and XTM, I would say we're making great progress. It has not been easy or problem-free, believe me, but thanks to the excellent support that we have received from you guys and all the teams involved in this effort, I would say that we have onboarded over 90% of all the repositories that we need to monitor for UI changes.
All right, very good. All right, so just so viewers, this is always interesting to me. Like, where does localization sit in your organization? Do you report to development or marketing or something else?
Actually, the localization team, along with the technical documentation team, reports into the product management organization. The Avigilon localization program is centralized. So, and as I mentioned before, we support the entire organization, focusing on software development. We have 18 repositories so far that we need to constantly scan. Our local set goes from 2 languages all the way to 23, so there is a variety of language support. We also support the technical documentation team, which means we localize user documentation, spec sheets, quick start guides, inbox items. If on the side of marketing, we localize the website, localize marketing collateral materials, emails, forms, campaigns, so many, and the customer experience as well, end user and partner communities.
So would you say you're spread thin? You're not overstaffed.
Trust me, we're not.
That's another thing in common with like every localization team. Okay, good. Okay. All right. So before you had any continuous systems in place, maybe describe what was your situation and requirements and what was going on in your organization.
When I joined the organization, it wasn't, it was busy, but it wasn't too bad. I was basically just scanning 5 repositories. I was well aware of all the milestones and dates, so it wasn't It was busy, but it was manageable. However, the company has been growing significantly in the past couple of years, both organically and through acquisitions. So now the number of development teams has increased, of course, as a result, both locally and in other countries. So we now have geographically dispersed software development teams. This includes countries such as the United States, Poland, Scotland, just to name a few. Now we have more features that need to be delivered faster, and we have more markets to reach also as a result of this growth. Now, this last one, more markets to reach, as you can imagine, it means more locales need to be supported by our software. Furthermore, our cloud-based solutions are adopting microservices architecture approach. And if you are familiar with microservices, everything is kind of independent. They can release anytime they are ready. They can deploy anytime they are ready. And they also need to be localized if they are going to be used by other solutions which handle a particular language set. So over a little bit of a year ago, I would say, it was clear that unless we found a way to automate some of the software localization workflows, we were just not going to be able to keep up with our development teams. It's not a matter of just throwing bodies, right? You can add more project managers, but that is not really scalable, right? You can make clones of Jen or myself, but again, how many clones do you need? It's not scalable. So this is a situation where the proverbial do more with less applies completely. We really needed to do more with less, given the fact that the number of repositories more than tripled in the last year. So there is also a need to increase the release cadence, and this aligns with what you mentioned earlier. We need to release faster if we are going to keep on top of the market. Our previous processes, unfortunately, did not offer that flexibility. We needed to deliver translations in a timely manner, but we also need to keep localization affordable, and that was not the case. So that's basically when our quest to find the right tools started.
All right. For those who maybe are kind of new to the software world, when we talk about microservices, it's a specific type of software architecture that really isolates different features that can be plugged and played in differently with different products. And it just, for localization, think of it this way, it adds complexity because there's more of it that has to be tracked, and it's never moving in parallel. So one team is doing this, the other team is doing that. They have a very different cadence. And so things like visibility to what's happening there, automation become more and more important. So in some ways, continuous localization is friends with increased complexity. The two go hand in hand often. And, you know, kind of microservices is this whole movement that we're seeing like across the board in development teams. So, I have to say it's extremely common that people are moving to that, and it's causing new issues for many localization groups. All right, so, you know, take yourself back. How did you imagine, like, what did success look like? You know,
well,
when you started the journey.
We wanted to find a tool that you press a button and everything was done automatically. No, we were actually trying to find a tool that definitely scan repositories on a regular basis. That was huge. As you said, things get done not necessarily in parallel, so you need to be on top of things. We also needed to be notified when changes in the resource files happen, and be able to automatically send those changes for translation. One of the key things that we were looking at the time is that for us being able to send deltas only, that was something that it was important for us. And to be quite honest, at the time we were not sure that the same tool was able to automatically download the translations once they were done. We didn't really know that part that much. All we wanted to do is, okay, so there are new strings in the repositories. We need to know when that happened, and we need to send them right away for translation. Once the translations were done, we kind of, okay, so we will find a way to deal with that. But we actually found a Lingoport, and Lingoport downloads the translation, which is great, and commits them in the repository directly, which is also huge, because all you have to do in the morning, you sit down with your coffee and just go over the repositories and make sure as to what you need to merge into the target branch. We were basically looking for a process that was as hands-free as possible. That was the main. How that process looked like at the time, we didn't really necessarily know. And we also were very keen on keeping our cost affordable, right? Because we didn't have neither the human power or the unlimited money to spend, to keep localization ongoing. So that was basically what we wanted. Something that finds strings for us, let us know that there are new strings, send them for translation. And on top of that, we found something that once the translations are done, puts them back in our repositories, which is huge.
All right, great. Move on here. All right, so security, I know that came up big. When you have a continuous localization system, by nature, you're connecting with a software repository where the source code is. So maybe you can talk about, that hoop, rather in your words rather than mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So source code is one of the most important assets for Motorola, no doubt. The connector we chose have to be installed on-prem. And so that means any cloud-based solutions were completely out of the question. And we have to prove that the only resource files that were sent out to our translation partners were only resource or language files, nothing else, nothing even resembling source code. And at the same time, we have to prove that whatever we got back from our vendor were only files with strings, nothing even remotely that looks like source code. So that was something very important for us. And at the same time, that meant we have to evaluate both tools, Lingoport and XTM. They have to be thoroughly tested by our IT department. They raise concerns, they raise questions, and we were able to address those concerns. Lingoport was able to address those concerns, to respond to those questions in a timely manner, because this process, when you say it, it sounds fast, but it's really not. We went through a series of weekly meetings with the security team, just talking about what the progress was in this testing and what the concerns were, what the measures to address those concerns had been taken or not, and to make sure that they were happy with what we were going to install. And that's how we basically were able to overcome the security step in this process. Now, on top of that, of course, our PIC should have an intuitive user interface, because we were going to be ultimately the responsible for maintaining the tool and maintain the daily activities. No external consultants or integrators were going to be allowed to access neither the server or repositories. A short learning curve was also important. At the time, there was a big chance that only one person, myself, was going to be able to manage everything, maintaining the tool, and keep up with daily activities. So I didn't really have the time too much time to spend, in learning how to operate the tool while keeping up with my normal workload. So it has to be something relatively easy to use. Luckily, Jen joined us, and now we are both basically up to speed on how to manage this tool, to manage Lingoport.
All right. You know, I'm just going to mention that security is just you know, dealing with security concerns happens at almost every one of our customers. And if yes, all of our products do touch source code. You know, in the case of like Globalizer, it's literally scanning what the developers are doing daily. Localizer also is always scanning repos. So security has always been super important. And while we do offer hosted services for those that want it, I would say it's like an 80-20 rule. Like at least 80% of our large, like almost every one of our large customers goes on-prem. And
yes.
You know, and we understand that. It's a sensitive thing. All right. So you got started. I just want to mention that this photo is like real. There's a run between San Jose in California and Denver, where there's two women pilots. And I didn't take this picture. I searched on the web for it, but I have a picture of both of them in the cockpit because I just thought it was so cool. Anyway, that aside, you just don't see that. You know, we need more of that, right? All right, so you didn't just jump in
No.
you know, with both feet. You ran a pilot, so that's part of your journey. I mean, tell us about that effort.
Yes, of course. Yes. So as I said, we started looking into tools more than a year ago. So it has been a slow process, but we just have to make absolutely sure that what we chose, it was what we needed. So for the TMS evaluation, we selected software products based purely on file format. As you can imagine, having 18 repositories, it means that we handle every file format under the sun. For Lingoport, we actually selected software products based on their priority. So we use our flagship products for the trial with Lingoport. And as it happens, those flagship products are actually handling very challenging file formats, and Olivier can attest to that. Of course, some customization was required, and we have to make sure that Lingoport could address that kind of customization to the level that we needed. So as I said, we evaluated two TMSs. We evaluated Lingoport with another connector. We kind of weighed what we needed and what we wanted, so to speak. We assign weights to those nice to have or need to have, and that's how we actually chose Lingoport as the connector, among other things, of course.
All right, you bring up the issue of file formats. You know, there are some files like properties files that are, you know, Java properties are pretty well defined, right? JSON, for instance, is a little bit of I'll use an American colloquialism. It's sort of the Wild West. I mean, there is no, all JSON resource files for translation will have this format, right? So Luz is talking about the need. It's a lot easier if you can be flexible in terms of what comes in and out versus trying to get the developers to change, which is an uphill battle. We're going to talk about stakeholders in just a couple of slides.
Hi, this is Olivier here. Luz, can you talk about some of the file formats that we
absolutely
put together?
Yeah, so we have at least one software product that uses a customized solution to implement their the localization. So it's a TXT file. So yes, of course, you need to transform that into something that is localization friendly and something that has to be consumed by XTM. We also have YAML files, and we're still having a lot of fun with those type of files. Remember that at some point I mentioned that we should be able to send only deltas. So grabbing those deltas from a YAML file has been a challenge. We're still working on that, and I will talk a little bit more about on the development side, the efforts that we're trying to actually change that file format. Mm-hmm. We have XML files, we have JSON files. Lucky us, we were able to get inserted into the microservices development teams very early. So we are using JSON files for all the microservices, and it has been great because basically we're using the same format for a good chunk of software products. And we have property files, we have regex files. Am I missing anything else, Olivier? I think those are the main file formats that we're using. But yeah, definitely we need some transforms in order for XDM to consume those files.
Okay, good. All right, let's talk a little bit, and I told you Olivier was listening in. He was like the voice from beyond there. Let's talk a little bit about budgeting. You know, every organization can't just kind of take out their credit card for enterprise software. There's quite an impact. Even outside of money, there's an impact on the organization. So maybe talk about that process and what you were measuring for and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, there is obviously a cost attached to this tool, right? However, the time savings that we're getting are significant. And sometimes time, you cannot even measure, well, you can measure it in terms of money, but time is something that either you have or you don't have. So at this point, we're at the point where that we don't have to spend hours preparing translation packages, which it used to happen before. There is no manual diffing of the resource files in order to identify the changes in such files. We don't actually need to QA the translations deliveries on their way back because this is done by Lingoport. That is also a significant amount of hours that we are saving just there. We have the confidence that we are not missing any new strings. And this is very important to point out. Because if you know that a team is going to add 20 strings today, you go into the repository and there is only 18. You still need to send that translation because they are waiting the translations back, I don't know, tomorrow or the day after. You cannot wait for 2 strings to come and then send the whole package. But by now, we can actually do that. We can send 18 strings and we can send 2 strings tomorrow. And that is okay because we don't need to keep on top of those changes ourselves. Additionally, we have completely eliminated the cost and time spent in pre-processing and post-processing each translation request. Huge as well. That means basically we don't have to wait for all the 23 translators to complete their assignments for us to start merging translations into the target branch. We can just start merging those translations as we get them. There is no post-processing anymore. We can add more repositories, more languages without the additional complexity that sometimes this brings. And we didn't have to spend any time or resources that we don't have developing or maintaining our own connector. That is also huge. It sounds appealing when you know that there is an API that you can use to create your own connector. But it's not just coding for the new connector. You have to test it. You have to maintain it. If something goes wrong, you have to troubleshoot on the spot. Otherwise, the whole automation of the translation workflow is not there, right? It defeats the purpose.
All right. Thank you. I always like to talk about stakeholders in an organization because it's never just the localization team. You have your internal customers. Maybe talk a little bit about your concerns and experiences working with the software development teams as well as localization vendors. And I'm just going to preface that it's really common for that relationship between localization and software development to be a little thorny, actually, or difficult for some people on the localization side. So,
yeah, you know what? It sounds made up, but no, we're actually really lucky to work with an amazing group of software engineers.
that's
They
great.
actually get localization, and they know that it's important to keep it in mind when they are doing the job. I know it's unheard of, but we're just lucky. And maybe because we're fully embedded into those teams, you get to know them at a personal level as well, which is important. So we have developed this mutual relationship of trust and collaboration with them.
Nice.
It was very important that the transition from the previous tool to the new tools was as seamless as possible. You need to maintain that relationship. And basically, this meant that we needed to be able to continue delivering translations while the transition took place and keeping delays to a minimum, really to a very, yes, to minimum. They shouldn't even know that this was happening. And the way that we approach that is we talk to each of the repository owners and project managers of each team, because you need to talk to them in order for them to grant permission to Lingoport to access the repository. So they knew this was going on, but the rest of the developers, they didn't even know. And that's exactly what we needed. Because otherwise, it's like, so what's going on? Why we're not getting the translations when we need them, right? On the vendor side, we created this plan so they knew in advance the order in which we were going to onboard every software project. And this helped them to make sure that the templates were created in advance, the parsers were configured, workflows were in place and set up, and most important, that the translations memories were uploaded in XDM before we sent the first translation round, because we still needed all the leverage from those translation memories right off the bat. Throughout this process, of course, a big shout out to the Lingoport support. Olivier has taken us by the hand, step by step, during the whole onboarding process, creating transforms for us, helping us troubleshoot whenever issues arise. Because as you can imagine, something is going to happen. And I think it's better to know that rather than, oh, okay, so everything is going to be okay, nothing bad is going to happen. No, trust me, something is going to happen. So it's really helpful for us to have somebody we can rely on and we can ask questions whenever we need. I know it's also unheard of dealing with customer support. We get answers to our emails sometimes, most of the times in the same day. So that is huge for us. So thank you so much for that.
All right. Hey, Olivia, I know you're listening to that. I hope you're turning red. That's good.
Yes.
All right.
I did that on purpose. Yeah.
All right. So let's think about, scaling up. What concerns and what visions do you have, sort of going forward as things invariably get more and more complex, in terms of the organizations that you support?
Yes, that is actually a good question, because if we know things are not going to remain the same, the only constant is change. It seems in our case, or the case for the company, the only change is to keep growing. That's something that we need to keep in mind. So although the onboarding of the software products has been relatively fast, it has not been completely without bumps on the road, as I mentioned before. At the risk of sounding overconfident, I think by now we have a good grasp of what could go wrong, and most important, how to fix it or either work around it.
Mhm.
So I guess my main concern is about what we don't know.
Mhm.
Earlier, we talked about the growth of the company also through acquisitions. So there are definitely development teams that are joining us that do not know the way that we do things. We don't know the level of localization or internationalization knowledge that they have or they keep in mind. It's still an afterthought in most development environments. Is localization, yeah, we can do that later. It's not the case. So I guess my main concern is as we get more products onboarded and we have to help more development teams, is what exactly are they using? Are they using repositories that we haven't tested before, we haven't tried before, Mercurial? Are they using a customized solution to implement their localization so the translation files are neither localization friendly or standard? I think those are my main concerns, the things that we don't know. Because the things that we have experienced, we kind of know how to fix them. We kind of know where to start the investigation. But yeah, there might be things that we don't know, and that would be of some concern. Of course, if we keep the same level of support, I can sleep better at night.
All right, good. All right, so we have already a lot of questions. This is where we're going to move into Q&A. We have a good amount of time for that, so that's great. We were good with our allotted time. Thank you, Luz. Your answers have been like really crisp, really good. All right, so I'm going to go to the questions UI here. All right, first question, and somebody couldn't hear and then they could resolve. So that was really the first question, but we're going to skip that. All right, is the budget for localization centralized, or do you require different departments to fund localization projects?
Well, I know, as far as I know, we have within the localization budget, we have different buckets. So one bucket is for the software localization, another bucket is for marketing, and another bucket is for technical documentation, for example. So whenever we get a quote, it goes into a particular bucket. And it's Paula really the one that so far she's managing all the budgets. We provide input, of course, at some point during the year as to what we expect for the next year, so she can start planning. But really, it's just that kind of division: software, technical documentation, marketing, customer experience.
Okay, very good. This next question, I think you answered already, but if you have any, well, no, this is a little different. And this is a question sort of, I have my own answers to this, as what I see as the future of localization. But anyway, this question is, do you use MT for translation of UIs pulled from the repositories? Right.
No, we don't use MT. We do use MT for technical documentation, but not for software. We just leverage with whatever we have in the translation memories, and everything that is not 100% or an ice match has to be translated from scratch.
Right. You know, one of the things where this question may have come out of is one of the things that I have personally been, you know, kind of throwing out there is the idea, and this is not used by Luz's team, the idea that localization should sort of be always available to the development team. So it's always updated via MT, and then you clean it up. Of course, using one of our products, Localizer QA, that lets you go through, let's say, the latest feature in context and actually see it in the screen, and right there, correct the translation. So if it's so fast to do it in context, you can actually get your QA adaptations of the language done right there. And now you've kind of eliminated one cycle of, you're sending it out for translation and then your QA, doing the linguistic QA. You get them both done at once, and then the developer always sees, let's say, their feature. They can toggle between locales on their settings and always see what it looks like in other languages. So you have that sort of full visibility round trip. So that is a possibility for teams that I see in the software localization's future, and that we've tooled around that. Me saying it and the marketing accepting it are two different things, but it is possible. And I even wrote about it a little bit on our blog. Thinking of localization like a utility, like electricity. Like, you don't question that you plug a lamp into the wall and it turns on right away, right? You wouldn't expect it to take a day or 2 or 3 to get the translations, to get the electricity back. That would be bad, right? So I could see with the technology, MT has gotten a lot better. So as long as it's easy to clean up the MT in the software, why not use it? And that's not a question for, I don't want to put Luz on the spot for that. People may feel like, no way, I don't want to do that. What if I mess it up? And I get that. There's adjustment that's needed for that. So, all right. Next question. Continuous localization can come, by the way, I haven't previewed these. Continuous localization can come at a cost with minimum charges and project management, often imposed by LSPs. This goes against the goals of continuous localization, where small batches are frequently sent for translation. How does your current LSP perform in this regard?
So that is one of the things we're working on right now. We are trying different approaches to tackle this. Right now, the main achievement we have done is that we are putting together all the translations sent in a period of time, regardless of the product or the template they are using for translation, into one quote. So they basically allow us to, instead of sending one quote for ACC, one quote for ACM, blah, 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 we put everything using the word count for every single project together in just one single quote. It is true that is an issue, because sometimes you might not even send any strings, right? It could be that for 1 day or 2, all the changes are happening on the server side. There is no user facing strings, so they don't send anything. And you cannot ask them to have translators just waiting there for you to send translation. That is a reality that we have. So what we are trying to do right now is, maybe on their side, and they have to manage that, is something that we're not going to do anything about it. Maybe they can put together several clients and say, okay, so based on the cadence that these clients send translations, we can guarantee this contractor this many strings. So when they receive the translations, at least it's not that they are going to wait for nothing. They know that there are strings, regardless of whether the strings are coming from client A or B. They are going to have a guaranteed influx of work, so they can respond better to our needs. This is still in progress. I have every confidence that we're going to get there. We have also a very good relationship with our vendor, and they have been super supportive in the whole integration of tools, and they are working really hard on that right now. But yeah, that is a valid concern.
Just because I see a lot of different localization companies that are part of, sort of the whole value chain for customers. I'll mention that there are some vendors that adapt much better to continuous localization than others. That said, I don't want to say anything on the air. here while it's being recorded. But there are some organizations that really understand that this is what they have to support in order to create the success of their customers. And, you know, of course, there's going to be, you know, sort of trade-offs. I will say that the other thing is, if the data that comes to the localization vendor is consistently good, the files are consistently good, and they, you know, the minute the localization vendor has to spend QA time on 18 words, that's bad. And that's understandable as a problem. So this is definitely a case of like, make sure whatever you do, if you're taking on continuous localization, that your vendor gets clean files that they can work out without thinking like they're going to have to sign an engineer to oversee these files. All right, very good. Hopefully that answered that question. I think it's a really important one. All right. Here, so you use Lingoport tool along with some other TMS, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lingoport, by the way, is a suite of software. There, that if you go to lingoport.com and hit the products section, you'll see that there's internationalization, there's local continuous localization, and QA solutions, and even within each one of those, there's components like dashboards and you know, all this stuff that works together. There's a bot that works in Slack so that you can like onboard projects right from Slack. I mean, there's some really cool stuff on there. And it also works with Microsoft Teams, but you know, there's the pride in me bristles at the word tool, because I think of it as like, this is a product set,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but I know for the rest of the world, they think of it in terms of tool. All right. Hello, can you support separate import-export workflows for multiple branches of code?
We haven't tried. I know that it is possible. We haven't tried it. Right now, we just follow the main target branch, and we have this, and this is why it's important to have a good relationship with the developers. So even if they are working in different branches, at the end of the day, everything related with localization gets merged into the master main develop branch. So that's where we pick it up. And if necessary, we cherry pick translations into other branches. But that is something that we do on our side. We haven't tried the multiple branches scenario.
Right. Now, just in terms of what I've seen, you know, I can think of one customer with a single product that's supporting 240 odd repos simultaneously. And that's just one product in the organization. So sometimes it can get very complex. So
Yes.
It kind of depends on your organization. All right. About missing strings, are you using any pseudo localization methods?
No, not for software.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that is automated in Localizer.
Yes, it can be. I think we tried for the first product that we onboarded, but it really didn't really take that much time to onboard every project, that we decided like, no, let's just jump right into each of the translation rounds, and we didn't have to do anything like that for the rest of the projects. Yeah, but it is possible to do it in Lingoport.
Okay, next
Yeah, just
question.
gonna add one little thing there, is that we automatically detect missing translations, and that is actually what is being sent to the TMS and back. So pseudo localization is nice to test ahead, but in reality, we handle all the missing translations.
Yeah, I think that's when I mentioned that we are confident that we're not missing anything. That's really something nice to have.
All right. This is a question that I actually didn't address at the beginning. It says, I may have missed the beginning, but in your words, what is the difference between internationalization and localization? Luz, you want to take a first shot at that?
Yes, of course. So basically, internationalization is about enabling your software to accommodate different locales. Once your software has been internationalized, then you start localizing, which is taking the cultural characteristics such as language, culture, you name it, from a particular market, and then implement it in your software. You may have a more fancier way to say it, but it is basically internationalized is something that can accept other locales. Locales is actually work on that specific locale and implement it into your software.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. The only thing I'd add is that there's a tendency to in our industry to think that internationalization is just about externalizing strings or the words that are in the application, putting them in a separate file. That's certainly part of it, but you have a lot of other issues that include literally the logic of how the software works. So think of, Luz mentioned locale. That's language, but it's also there are issues like the developer may have broken up a message into programmatic elements or concatenations that build the string over, based on variables like plurals and the like. And yes, those might not work in your target language. The word order may be different. There may be, several ways to express a plural. There may be masculinity, femininity of your statement. So you need to account for that. Also, number formats, date formats, currencies, address formats, phone numbers. I mean, the list is actually pretty long. And it's also different. That list is different in different markets.
Yeah, definitely. And there are things like the ones that you mentioned that there are somehow obvious, but there are some other ones that are not as obvious. For example, being able to support UTF-8 in your databases. So if you have people non-native, not English speakers creating data, input data into database, that database should be able to support those characters. Otherwise, you cannot use user-defined data in your application. So.
Right. Okay, next question here. I am understanding that Lingoport is used for extracting source content from code, etc. What is the translation platform connected with Lingoport? I think you actually did answer that. But,
yeah, it's XDM.
Right. All right. And we actually connect to quite a number of EMS systems. You mentioned, here's a follow-up question here. You mentioned the use of XTM several times. Is that a required TM for localize? Or I'll answer no.
As far as I know, no, it's just the tool that, remember when I mentioned that we were evaluating at least 2 TMSs at the same time, just, to have something to compare to. That's the one that we chose at the end of that evaluation.
Right. I'll also say we even have customers that don't have a TMS. They just have us connect right to their localization vendors portal. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Okay. Is Lingoport connection to CMSs possible as well? That's one of those it depends things. I mean, Lingoport is really built. We build around software. I mean, that's kind of that's our jam, man. That's software development. There are cases where a lot of content is being used in Git repositories. There's always the chance for something customized, but we don't really focus on pure content management systems per se, at least at the time of this recording. Boy, we have so many questions. I'll keep going. By the way, but we are running out of time. So if you need to leave at the end of the hour, let me just say thank you for attending. You'll automatically get a link for the recording. It usually takes a few days to get that sort of processed and up on a web page and the like. But you don't have to do anything. You'll get it. All right. Does the TM sit at Avigilon or is it controlled on the LSP side?
you mean the translation memory?
Yeah.
Yes, no, that is on the vendor side. However, as part of the delivery, we get exports from XTM. It's actually a very good question. I'm one of the people that believes that you should own your translations. It's an asset. So you should be able to get it in a format that you may use it for something else. And we do. We actually use the UI translations in the technical documentation. So if the technical documentation is saying, okay, click on download video, the download video translation should be the same as the one that you see in the software.
Very good. Okay. For e-commerce, I'm thinking that's an incomplete question. I'll just say, yes, we do support e-commerce applications. In fact, I'm not legally able to name them, but the two largest e-commerce providers in the world use our software. Everybody here has probably bought from at least one of them. That's all I'm allowed to say. All right. MT is an interesting topic. Garbage in, garbage out. I'm not going to name the person named their company, but I'm not going to name it. Just measured the amount of fully formed strings in the UI and identified that 30% of the UI strings could be effectively translated. How do you see MT evolving in your organization in the future?
Well, I definitely agree, and we make a point to review the translations even before, the strings, even before they go into the repository. If the string is ambiguous, is wrong, it has grammar issues, that problem is going to translate in as many languages you are translating that string. So you definitely have to clean it up. I'm a little bit concerned about I wouldn't use machine translation for our software, given the fact that the terminology that we handle is very industry specific. So we need to use the correct translations if we are going to let other users to understand what we're trying to say. I guess it depends on your risk tolerance of getting a translation that is completely wrong. In our case, that's very low. We need to get things right from the beginning. Remember that we're working for security and video surveillance, access control. We need to make sure that the operators of the software understand exactly what's going on.
You know, it's interesting you say risk tolerance. For instance, if you're in e-commerce and something would have never been translated anyway, usually the risk tolerance is fairly low, right?
Yes.
I'll also mention that there's so much going on the machine translation front in terms of, you know, the switch over for statistical to other forms of translation engines that have increased the blue score. That's the score of accuracy of machine translation. Plus, some engines are much more trainable than others. We've been doing a lot of testing ourselves to, you know, kind of like I talked about, like, you know, the plugging in the repos all the time. Well, some of that depends on the accuracy of the translation, not just naked, but after just a little bit of a feedback loop going into the machine translation. So that's probably, you know, that's probably another webinar. I actually need to.
That is another webinar. Absolutely, yes.
The expert. I had somebody from Sistran on about a year ago talking about this, but it'd be nice to get somebody like from the Amazon team and the Google team and you know, some others, somebody from SDL and the like. So that's a homework assignment for me to
Yeah.
release later this year. I'll have that webinar. All right. That is all of our questions. We're finishing 2 minutes after the hour. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect.
Most of you stayed on. Really appreciate it. Olivier, we didn't need you for any zingers, but thank you for joining in the background. Luz, you did a great job. Really appreciate you sharing.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. That was really fun. All right.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So no point messing with you.